Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Anthony with the VR Game Rankings YouTube channel, and of course, this is the daily vlog series. It is Friday, March 2nd. This is episode 110, and we have a handful of news stories to dive into, so why don't we just go ahead and get the ball rolling? Okay, we're going to start off our first story of the day. The Oculus Rift has overtaken the HTC Vive as the #1 Steam VR headset. So basically, this comes down to the Steam hardware survey. Now, Valve does this every single month. They do a Steam hardware survey where they automatically check to see what type of devices is hooked up to Steam, what kind of graphics cards, what kind of CPUs, and what kind of external hardware devices are hooked up to Steam, and it does this Steam hardware survey. They've been doing this for months. HTC Vive has always been the leading Steam VR platform, but this is the first month where Oculus Rift has overtaken the HTC Vive. Now, it's still very much a neck and neck race. This is a horse race. It is a photo finish, but the Oculus Rift horse has stuck its head slightly in front. The Oculus Rift has 47.31% of the VR hardware market on Steam. HTC Vive has 45.38%. So as you can see, it is very close. Now, bringing up the rear is the Microsoft mixed reality platforms. Those have increased their percentage a little bit from the previous month. Last month, they were at 5.17%. They have now climbed up to 5.36%. And you also have the Oculus DK2 at just under 2% usage. Now, does this mean anything really? Is there alarm bells going off at HTC's headquarters about this? Should HTC fanboys be up in arms or upset about this? No, none of that should take place, because here's the deal. What we have to remember, in the year 2017, think about the price of the Oculus Rift for the entire year of 2017 compared to the price of the HTC Vive for the entire year of 2017. The Oculus Rift has been much cheaper, considerably cheaper, and basically this comes down to dollars and cents. There's a lot of people out there, they might be interested in an HTC Vive, but they see the Summer of Rift or whatever promotions are going on. They end up buying an Oculus Rift because it is just a hell of a lot cheaper. That's pretty much what this boils down to. Honestly, this has been expected. In fact, if anything, it might be more shocking that the HTC Vive was able to hold on to the lead as long as it has been able to do that, even despite this price disparity between these two hardware platforms. So it really shouldn't come as any shock that Oculus should take the #1 spot, and I fully expect them to hold on to that #1 position for a very long time, at least until there's another major price drop from the HTC Vive to make it a little bit more even. And I also expect the Microsoft mixed reality platform to slowly but surely increase its percentage as well, especially when you see all these fire sales that take place on Amazon. Sometimes you can get these Microsoft mixed reality headsets for as low as $240, somewhere in that kind of a price range. It just makes it a very attractive option for somebody that is looking to get into PC VR gaming without breaking the bank. Now, speaking of PC VR gaming, this is kind of a side story. There are a number of people out there that are estimating that there are now 1 million PC VR gamers. Now, we know we have millions of Gear VR users. We know we have millions of Google Cardboard users, and we know that we have a little bit over 2 million PlayStation VR users. But when it comes to PC VR, this could be the very first time that we have crossed 1 million users. Now, this is not official. This is basically people that are crunching the numbers. They're using data from this Steam hardware survey, and they're comparing that with the total number of Steam users, and they're doing the math. And the math basically comes out and tells them that there are 1 million PC VR players. And I think this is really good news for us overall, because basically 1 million players, yes, that is a relative niche. It is not like huge mainstream population of players, but what it tells all the developers out there, there is this core market. There is a core segment of PC VR players, and this is very important because I think you're going to have a lot of indie developers that are going to look at 1 million PC VR users, and they know that if they can bring out a PC VR game that can work across the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift, and the Windows Mixed Reality platforms, if they can work across all three of those platforms, they have about 1 million potential customers, and that is a big deal. So even if PC VR gaming doesn't explode into this monstrosity that we would love it to turn into, even if that doesn't happen, we do have a core niche of players, and they are very passionate. They buy a lot of games. They are very enthusiastic. So this is nothing but good news as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's go to our third story of the day. The third story of the day is Ready Player One. As you know, we are now in March 2nd. Ready Player One comes out on March 29th. We only have a little bit over 3.5 weeks to go, and we will be in the movie theater watching Ready Player One. In fact, this kind of reminds me I should probably lock down some tickets to this movie now, sooner rather than later. Get my tickets set up. I want to be able to see this on the very first day. I'm not really much of a movie buff, but for this movie, I'm going to go ahead and go down that road because I do believe this movie is very important because it could kickstart a second wave of VR enthusiasm and hype, and I think it could be very important for the industry in general. But why am I bringing it up right now? I'm bringing it up right now because the South by Southwest Festival kicks off a little bit later this month on March 9th, and it runs through March 18th. But starting on opening day and running through March 11th, there will be Ready Player One experiences at Brazos Hall. Now, Brazos Hall is kind of a famous turn of the century warehouse that hosts a lot of really cool events in Austin, Texas. It's located at 4th and Brazos in Austin, Texas. And basically at this hall, it's going to be nothing but Ready Player One propaganda and promotion from March 9th through March 11th. There's going to be a lot of experiences for guests to try out. There's going to be actors from the movie that are going to be showing up and having promotional events as well. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff going on. I'd love to make a trip to Austin, Texas, by the way. I've actually never visited Austin, Texas. I've always kind of heard it's like the Seattle/San Francisco of the Southwest. I've heard it's a really cool city. I would love to check it out. So I need to get my butt to South by Southwest Festival at a certain point in time. Probably won't be able to make this one, but maybe next year or something. But if you are able to go to this one, the nice thing about it is, remember, HTC has worked out a deal with Ready Player One and Warner Brothers where there are going to be some Ready Player One experiences on the HTC Vive, some cross-promotional stuff that is going to go on with the HTC Vive and Ready Player One. And anybody that goes to this South by Southwest Festival, they're going to have an opportunity to try this out if you go to Brazos Hall and you get involved in some of these experiences. Now, what are you going to be able to do? Well, one of the things that guests will be able to do is they're going to be able to create their own 3D avatar, kind of a Ready Player One avatar. In the movie, you create your own avatar that you inhabit when you're in the Oasis. And so people that attend this festival, you're going to be able to create your own little 3D avatar, and then you're going to be able to email that to your email, so you'll be able to check it out later. Not sure what you'll be able to do after that, but it still is a kind of cool experience. And then there's also going to be these HTC Vive versions of classic arcade games and experiences that have been inspired by Ready Player One. So this is kind of the more interesting thing here, because you have to wonder, Ready Player One has licensed all kinds of classic stuff from the 80s and the 90s and pop culture in general. So there could be some classic arcade games that have been licensed by Ready Player One, and these experiences could be brought into VR and kind of revamped and made modern a little bit and kind of inspired by Ready Player One. And people that attend this festival, they're going to be able to possibly try this stuff out. Now, what about you and me that's sitting at home? Are we going to be able to try out any of this stuff? We don't know anything about that right now, but if it does happen, most likely it will come to Viveport, because HTC, of course, is working with Warner Brothers on this, and they're going to want to promote Viveport. So there is a possibility that after this hits this South by Southwest conference, that it could eventually make its way over to Viveport, and we might be able to try some of these classic arcade experiences that have been enhanced for this Ready Player One promotion. So it does sound interesting, does sound unique. We're definitely looking forward to that, and I'm absolutely looking forward to hitting that movie later this month on March 29th. Okay, the next topic that we have is there is another brand new VR game announcement, and I gotta say, this goes back to a VR Roundtable episode that I was on, I think at the very end of the year, where I was kind of worried a little bit. I thought there would be somewhat of a slowdown in the PC VR marketplace, kind of a backing away from a lot of companies, and maybe that has happened a little bit with some of the AAA companies. We've already seen CCP Games kind of back out. We've heard Crow Team kind of complain a little bit about lackluster sales, and then who knows how excited Bethesda is by the way their titles have sold, or say Rockstar with LA Noire. So maybe we're not getting a lot of AAA stuff, but we sure as hell are getting a ton of indie type stuff. There's been a lot of game announcements in recent weeks. It's actually been pretty damn good, and we've got another game announcement for you, and this comes from Cyan Incorporated. Now, this is the developer of Myst, Riven, and more recently Abduction. And so if you are a big fan of Abduction, here is their next game, and their next game is called Firmament. And the cool thing about this one is this is a VR specific release. Now, what have we got for this game? Well, we do have a teaser trailer. We also have some screenshots that have been released. We have a little bit of information that is available on the game. In fact, this game is going to be shown off for the very first time at GDC, at the Game Developers Conference, and it is going to be featured at the Indie Mega Booth. And if you go to the Indie Mega Booth website, there is some information on Firmament that is there right now, and I'll go ahead and read this for you. It's kind of basically the gist of what this game is going to be featuring. Okay, so here's how it reads. From Cyan, the indie studio that brought you Myst and Abduction, comes a new steampunk adventure. The game of Firmament is a resplendent, magical journey, a monumental voyage through 4 diverse and curious realms where you work in concert with an ever-present clockwork companion under the guidance of a long-dead ethereal mentor. Everything is not as it seems. Okay, so I watched the trailer, I checked out some of the screenshots for this game, and I gotta tell you, I'm getting a little bit of the Gallery Episode 2 Heart of the Emberstone vibe. Is anybody else out there getting a little bit of that vibe? Now, of course, Heart of the Emberstone, it's very much a puzzle game, but it's also kind of more of an action-adventure game where Cyan is known more for that pure puzzle type of experience. That's kind of what we got with Abduction, but it is similar in some ways to Heart of the Emberstone, and looking at the trailer, looking at the screenshots, it does look to be relatively similar in certain respects. Looks very beautiful, looks drop dead gorgeous. And one of the things that we got to hope with this is the fact that this is a very VR specific game rather than Abduction. Abduction was a flat game that was basically then converted to VR. So the hope here is with this being very VR specific, that this game will run better. It'll run smoother. It'll perform better. It'll be a little bit better dialed in. One of the problems that we had with Abduction is if you didn't have a really powerful PC rig, and even if you did, sometimes you may have had some issues running Abduction. But with this being very VR specific, hopefully the requirements will be lessened maybe a little bit. Hopefully it'll run a little bit better. So we're definitely looking forward to that. We do not have any kind of a release date or anything like that. Obviously, more information will be coming at the Game Developers Conference. And if you happen to go to the Game Developers Conference, definitely check out the Indie Mega Booth. You might be able to get a little bit of a first-hand experience with Firmament. Looking pretty good. You know, speaking of Abduction, what about the PlayStation VR version of Abduction? I did report on that a while back, and I remember the last time I reported on it, see, Abduction is available for PlayStation 4, and it's supposedly coming to PlayStation VR, but there needs to be an update. There needs to be a patch that will allow it to work on PlayStation VR. And the last thing that we heard with this is Cyan was reaching out to some of their fans and letting them know that it is currently in the certification process with Sony. That was the last information that we heard on it. I haven't heard anything since, so it's possible there may have been some slight issues with the certification process, and Sony might have kicked it back to Cyan and said, you know, you got to make some minor alterations. They're probably doing that now, and then it'll get back to Sony. Hopefully it'll get through the certification process, and if you are a PlayStation VR player, hopefully you won't have to wait too long. You'll be able to get your hands on Abduction and be able to try that out. I'm looking forward to it as well, because my PC is a little bit on the lower end side of things, so when it's up and running on PSVR, I might actually try Abduction over there. Okay, before we bounce out of here, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Moss for PlayStation VR. Now, I have not finished this game. I know it is relatively short, but I haven't finished it, but I have put some additional time into it. I'm guessing that over this weekend, I will probably wrap up my play session with Moss, and so next week I'll have a little bit more of final thoughts on this game. But this is an important release for 2018. It is really quite magical. There are a lot of incredible things about this game, Moss. Even though it is a third-person game, even though it is a seated, controller-based game, and I know that can turn some people off, this is still a very powerful title. And so I had a number of little things that I wanted to get into, some continued thoughts that I wanted to talk about. So these are kind of random thoughts, and I'll just kind of go into each of them. Just certain things that I wanted to bring up is when you're playing this game, like I don't know if anybody else out there is playing Moss, and when you're playing Moss, you control this little mouse Quill, and you're moving her around and you're doing different actions. You control her, but then you're also interacting with her as well. And has anybody else felt like whenever they accidentally kill Quill, they feel really, really bad? I don't know if it's just me, but I feel really bad anytime Quill dies. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, she makes these little noises, like the audio, like all of her little noises and expressions are very cute and just endearing, basically. And when she dies, oh man, she makes some horrible noises that make you feel so bad. And then also at the very second of when she dies, the music kind of drums up in a certain way to let you know, oh man, she's died. And then also your controller rumbles. And so I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I really feel responsible every time Quill dies, like in a personal way. I don't know, it's kind of different. There's something a little bit different about that. The other thing I wanted to say about Moss is, so playing the game, it is drop dead gorgeous. Now, the thing is, you can still very, very clearly see the screen door effect. In fact, sometimes in these third-person platforming type games, you actually notice screen door even more than normal. For example, if you guys have played Lucky's Tale, you know when you're moving Lucky around and you're moving the little fox around, you kind of, when you look at the fox, you can see the pixels on the actual character. It seems to be a little bit more noticeable, and that's the same thing with Moss. But I gotta tell you, there is going to be a day when screen door is completely eliminated and when we have super high resolution and just playing Moss and looking at all the characters and looking at the world and the environment that you're in, there's going to be a time when that is so freaking crystal clear and is so sharp and detailed that it's really going to look like a living, breathing cartoon. And I kind of feel like that right now with Moss the way it is right now, but I know on future hardware with even higher resolution and less screen door, it is going to be beyond magical. That's just one of the little things I noticed about Moss. Now, one of the negative things that I'll mention in regards to Moss, and this is in regards to a lot of PlayStation VR games in general, and it's something that I call swim, okay? I call it the PlayStation VR swim. And what I mean by this is sometimes you'll get people complaining about your entire world in the PlayStation VR starts wobbling, okay? I'm not talking about that. I know what causes the wobbling. If anybody out there has ever experienced their PlayStation world wobbling really significantly, typically what causes that is you got your hands too high. You're probably playing a game that uses move controllers and you're raising your hands up, and what you're doing is you're actually blocking some of the lights that are on your headset. And when you block the lights on your headset, that's when you get that really harsh wobble. Now, I'm not talking about the wobble, I'm talking about a PlayStation VR swim. And what it is, it's very subtle, but what it is, it's kind of like a slow, kind of like an easy moving back, kind of this gentle moving, almost like you're playing your PlayStation VR on a boat, and the boat is swaying a little bit from side to side, and you're getting a little bit of this swim motion that I talk about. Now, not every PlayStation VR game features this. There's some PlayStation VR games that seem rock solid and have no swim whatsoever, but there's a lot of other games that do have a little bit of this swim. And one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is, do you guys remember Jeff Gerstmann? Well, I'm sure you remember Jeff Gerstmann of Giant Bomb fame, one of my favorite podcasters. I used to absolutely love the Giant Bomb. Even after getting into VR, I still listened to Giant Bomb on a regular basis. But I remember Jeff Gerstmann was very critical of the PlayStation VR. And I mean, this is years ago, so I don't know if his take has changed any recently, but he was very critical of PSVR, and he almost felt like PSVR is broken. And I wonder if part of that is he's experienced a lot of games that have this gentle swim, and it is a little bit frustrating. And I did notice this swim with Moss. That's one of the negative things that I've noticed about it. I'm not sure if anybody else has noticed that at all, but the one thing I'll say about this PSVR swim is when we get to PlayStation VR 2, that needs to be completely eliminated. The whole the wobble situation and the swim situation must be completely eliminated, because I could see that being something that would kind of turn people off and bother them as well. One other thing that I'll say about Moss, a little bit on the negative side of it, is so basically this game is a platforming game, but it kind of turns into much more of a puzzle game. And I talked about this before, where you're kind of traveling from one location to another, and then you get to a location, and then bam, you're now at this location, and the game is taking place at this location. And basically what it is you're dealing with a number of puzzles that you have to solve in this one specific location. And the only negative thing I have to say in regards to this is what'll happen is you might get to a location and you get through some of these puzzles, but you're stuck. And then you're stuck, and that can kind of be frustrating, where a game like Lucky's Tale doesn't have as many of these puzzle elements, and so you kind of continually flow through Lucky's Tale. And so a game like Moss or a game like Kin, which is somewhat similar, a lot of puzzle elements are included in it, you can get into certain locations where you're kind of stuck, and that can kind of be a little bit of a frustrating thing. But you know what? Speaking of these puzzles, I wanted to get to one other really positive thing about Moss, and this is one of the things that I think takes Moss into a whole different realm compared to a lot of other third-person platforms that we're experiencing. And so basically, one of the things that I was talking about Moss is that Moss is not just a seated game. It is a seated game with a DualShock 4 controller, but one of the things you'll find, like I'm in this certain level right now where it's kind of like almost like a little castle that Moss is inside of, and you're working Quill, Moss, I called it Moss. You're working Quill through this little castle and through these different little puzzles. And what I've found is I've actually had to get up out of my seat and kind of look into the world to try to see, okay, where am I going to guide Quill to get her through this particular situation that's going on? And you actually have to get up and look around, like physically use your head. Now you are inside this game world along with Quill. You can kind of think of yourself like King Kong. We've all seen the movie King Kong. You know that part when King Kong sticks his hand through that hotel window and his giant ape gorilla hand goes through the window, and he kind of tries to grab the lady there, right, and pull her out of the window, or he kind of sticks his eyeball right up to the window of the hotel room. Well, you're kind of going to be doing the same thing in some of these puzzles because they get kind of intricate, they get kind of complicated, and you're actually going to physically have to get up out of your chair and kind of look through this puzzle and stick your head almost into the world of these little rooms and kind of see what's going on. But it doesn't break. It doesn't have any problems with this. I think this is actually encouraged, and I think it's part of the game. So this is a seated game, but it's interesting. It's almost like a seated room scale game, if there's such a thing. You're moving around, you're manipulating things, you're doing things. It's one of the most active seated games that I've ever played. And so basically, I continue to really enjoy this game, Moss. I do believe it is probably worth the $30 price. Well, if you're a platform, if you enjoy platform games. For example, if you played Bound on PlayStation VR, if you played Robots Rescue on the Playroom VR, if you've liked stuff like Lucky's Tale on the Rift, you're gonna love Moss. It is another one of these games. It is drop dead gorgeous, just beautiful environments. The sound is great. The sound design is great. The puzzles are intricate and interesting. The only real negative, combat is a little bit basic, but it's a fantastic experience, and I'll continue to talk about this, especially next week after I finish the game. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up, folks. Didn't mean to run so long. I do not want to have these long shows. I'd prefer it to be somewhere between 17 and 22 minutes, but oh well. Sometimes we got to run a little bit long. And so I hope you guys like this episode. Apologies again for that throwaway episode the other day. Hopefully this is a little bit better of an episode. So this was episode 110 of the show for Friday, March 2nd. Everybody have a wonderful weekend out there. Remember, Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes is a free weekend game this weekend. So if you have an Oculus account, you might want to try this game out, especially because it can involve other people in your household that maybe don't normally screw around with VR. You can get some of them involved in a game like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Free weekend trial. Definitely try it out. Everybody have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see everybody on Monday. Take it easy. Later.